Amen. And I will give a separate praise. You know, you guys don't always know what I'm doing when I leave the room, and, you know, Elder Billy's dealing with prayer time, but I'm often looking at the teaching just to be sure how he wants me to do it today. And I really kind of struggled with if I was going to go to John 14 or finish 1 John and then go to John 14. I praise Yah, I think it worked out beautifully. And so, because I almost moved it to I almost rearranged it. But I think that after looking at it and prayerfully considering it, that it was the right move. Because I really wanted you to see that what's happening in 1 John is what Yeshua is talking about in John 14. Okay, and how they connect together. And then we'll also see the same thing that we continue in 1 John, and eventually we'll end up in John 17, and we'll see this all tie together. Okay? And so it's just really beautiful. John really made every effort he could to really understand relationship. He was all heart. He wanted relationship more than anything else. And so we want to learn about relationship. John was the guy to learn from. All right? Amen. All right, so this is the Afterburn. This is when we have opportunity to ask questions or make comments about the teaching from today. So this is thoughts and comments and questions and answers. And so if you would like to line up here, Rabbi Tom, you're going to go first? You can come on up. Yep. And then if you're online, we have our Shamish team that will take your questions and comments. Okay, bear in mind that there's a lot of you, and so we might not get them all done. How many did we get on there today? About 680 something, and maybe more than that at some point, but that's great. Okay. I love when I talk to Arthur up in Canada, because he says he remembers when we did our very first live stream, and it was like 20 or less. You know, the very first time we streamed live, and we didn't do it on YouTube, we did it on a thing called live stream. And, you know, and I remember that first time, it was actually a funny moment because somehow he accidentally opened up 2 browsers, and so he contacted us, and I said, is it coming through okay? He says, yeah, but there's a weird echo. It turned out because he had it open twice. Okay, so it was kind of funny because he was trying to make sure he had it open so they could get it done. But, and that was only a handful of people back then. Now we've got almost 700 computers logged on. And again, it's not like we have anything. It just shows we're being effective. And we're being a blessing to those who could really benefit from this kind of a thing on a Shabbat. All right, Rabbi Tom, go ahead and start us off with the questions or comments.
Thank you. The verse where Yeshua says, if you hate me, you hate the Father. Okay, how should we properly understand that when we're thinking of, for example, some of these Orthodox rabbis who really love the Torah and really try to live it with their whole heart and soul? I mean, they're very sincere, but they just really sometimes rail against the Messiah, you know.
Okay. We need to embrace that they're railing against the Jesus that they were given, okay? They're not railing against Messiah, but all they know is all the things done in that version of Messiah's name to them, okay? Now, but you'll say, oh, but I tell them about Yeshua. But they just think you're trying to sneak Jesus into them anyway, okay? That's their thought. Oh, sure, you give him a Hebrew name, but you still believe in this one that caused us so much grief over the last 2,000 years. Stuff that was done in that name, all of the Holocaust type of things, all of the Inquisitions, all of the pogroms, a lot of these things are all done by Christians, all right? I think that sometimes we forget, and I'm not picking on modern day Christians or anybody in particular, but you know, as much as we look at things like radical Islam, go back and look at what the Christians did. Okay, the torturing and the killing that they did to try to get people to agree with them. This is not a new thing being done. And so the Jews have a long memory. And so it's not they're rejecting Messiah. They just can't accept the Messiah that they connect to those things. Okay? And so I think they'll have no problem accepting Messiah when he does come. And I think they'll be in very good shape because they love Yahweh and the Torah, okay? So they have that already. But I think the Father clearly understands that they can't receive, when you consider the history of what was done in the name of the New Testament Messiah. Now, whether we would ever think Yeshua would have been for all of that, we know he wouldn't. But the way they took Messiah and the authority that they claimed under that name, it's very hard for a Jew to get there, okay, very hard. Not a secular Jew like me, okay, but an Orthodox, believing, practicing Jew, especially the older ones who still can remember things like, the terrible things that were done in Christianity's authority. It's hard, okay? So it's a good question, but I can understand where they're coming from. And some of you think, but I'm gonna try to share Yeshua with them. And that might work with some. And I know some people that have had some pretty good success doing that, and if they had some people willing to hear. But just understand that you're really fighting an uphill battle against all of that, okay? So now you have to explain that the Messiah you believe in would never have been for all any of that, would never have done any of that, would never have supported any of that, and that they have to start to be able to receive. Again, it's a revelation that they have to have the ability to receive it. If they can't receive it, you're not going to get anywhere. All right.
All right. I know you just kind of briefed over it, but the part in 14:3, it talked about how he wanted to go and prepare a place for us. I just wanted to make a comment that just because he's preparing a place for us doesn't mean that we aren't needing to prepare ourselves to fit in that place.
Amen.
That means we can't fit in and be a great fit unless we do something to be that great fit. And,
Amen.
And then down on 5:6 it says, how do we know the way? Well, the best way to know the way is to study it out, the instructions given. As you said at earlier times, we should live or become Torah rather than just know of it.
Amen.
There's one more thing. It says, and then a lot of things, you talked about how it ends. We all know how it ends, but I think a lot of us are more concerned about avoiding the heartaches on the way. And it never promises that we're not going to have trouble or heartaches. And we should focus ourselves on the goal and not the journey.
Amen.
And then
Amen. All right. And I do apologize. Apparently, I didn't get the Steve memo, as both you and my son are wearing red shirts today, and I'm not. Okay, so
And then the last thing in 14:15, John 14:15, I talked about in 4:11 as what we do tells us what we believe. So,
yep.
And then in 14:15, like you had said before, the if means we have to choose to do it. It's not going to happen otherwise.
And also the if means and if you don't. Okay, if you do, something happens. There's a result. But also if you don't, something happens and there's a result. Okay? Craig?
When you were talking about us and our need for signs and wonders, it seems like not a lot, but some prayers and some things are not recited on Shabbat. Seems like maybe our Orthodox brethren change their prayers to some degree. With the signs and wonders and what we ask for maybe on a normal weekday from our Father, should that be changed on Shabbat to some degree, or to a large degree? Should our prayer requests change from less about what we need to more about His will, maybe for the strength to accomplish His will, to endure the tasks that are laid in front of us, but not so much as far as like a prayer for healing or like monetary blessings or things like that.
Well, our brothers in the Jewish community, what they have more often than not is things that are additional to Shabbat that you don't do during the week, as opposed to things you don't do. As far as the prayers are concerned, there are things that you add when it's Shabbat that you don't do when it's not. And so I don't know that I would agree that, we should not be asking for some of these things on Shabbat. But again, Shabbat is an opportunity to be vertically connected and focused. And so those are the times when I feel like we should be communicating, especially for the rest of the body, about things, and it could be even monetary. Not monetary like, hey, I need to buy a really much more fancy car, but maybe I need to actually be able to have one that doesn't break all the time. And so, be able to have food on my table. These are the things I think that are appropriate, okay? But I appreciate that you're trying to, see how that balance comes, okay? All right, Rob?
Okay, from Anna Uden, John 14:26. So we know we have the Ruach if we know the truth. That's her question, opposed to the Christian belief of proof by the speaking in tongues.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. You have, as evidence of your being touched from above, receiving of the Ruach, is your ability to understand without the delusion filter. Okay, if you can receive the truth, that connection is there. And you couldn't understand it without the Ruach, okay? Because the Ruach is the way that the Father and the Son have touched you to open that up. And go back to the Father and Son teaching, which talks about He is the one that chooses, right? The Son reveals the Father, and the Father reveals the Son to whom they choose, when they choose, and that's done through the Ruach connecting point. All right? And all of you, by the way, have some of the Ruach. Everybody on the planet does, because that's the connecting point that they plug in. That was the breath of life that you had put in you as a human being. But it's an inactive, disconnected point that you need to plug in. It's like, you get a house today and it has internet plugs all in the walls and ready to go. But until the internet is connected or the cable is connected, there's nothing happening. Okay, but you have that port ready to be connected in you. Everybody does. Okay, it's that moment when they choose to plug you into that connection that you now have that Ruach teaching, leading, and doing the things that are necessary. All right, Rob?
Okay, from Desiree, says in regards to chapter 14, verses 21 and 23, does this mean that Christians don't love Yah or Yeshua?
Okay, let's make this really clear. There's two sides to every relationship concept. In other words, there's the way you feel, okay, and the way I feel if we're in a relationship. And what's being said here is that you may have an emotion called love. In other words, you may really feel that love and appreciation and that emotion that we would call love for the Father and for the Son. What he's saying is that for the Father and the Son to feel loved, you need to do these things. It says, he who possesses my commands and guards them is he who loves me. In other words, from my perspective, Yeshua is saying. Now, from your perspective, you may love the God of the Old Testament and New Testament, or the way the Messiah is put out that you learned in church and everything else. So I'm not saying they don't love, but they're loving the representation they've received. They're not loving the genuine true, because it's been filtered and been convoluted and been twisted from what it really is. So I would not say they don't love. There are some very, very strongly passionate and emotionally connected, vertically Christians out there. Same as with the Jews, but they're still dealing with certain levels of inability to see what they're really connecting their emotion to. Okay? Both sides have that problem. And so, no, I would never say that they don't love him. What I'm saying is, it's just like they say they know him. They don't think they're lying, but they don't really know him if they're not keeping the commandments. John tells us that in 1 John. So I wouldn't call them like liar, 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 and call them liars, because they're not lying on purpose. Okay? Their behavior makes it clear that they're in a not true relationship. They're in a lie. They're living a lie, but they didn't know they were living a lie. They've been lied to. Okay? All right? And so, it's kind of like if you're married to someone and they're living a double life, but you don't know. But then it gets revealed, and then you can walk in truth. Well, you'll find out your Messiah isn't doing away with the Torah. You find out your Messiah doesn't want you worshiping him on Sunday. Your Messiah doesn't want you doing things, eating pork and shellfish. Your Messiah doesn't want all these things, Christmas and Easter, etc. But you didn't know that. So I think you were very honest and genuine and true with what limited you knew. and you genuinely had an emotion called love. But he says, but from my perspective, that's not how you express love towards me. Love towards me is represented by these things. It's kind of like we talk about the love language thing, you know? Now, I know that came out of Christianity, but I think it's a useful tool, okay? If your love language is, you know, acts of service, and I never do an act of service for you, I may genuinely love you, but you won't feel it, okay? If it's physical touch and I never hug you or touch you in any way that's loving, you may never realize that I love you, but I love you, all right? My mother-in-law had this disconnect. I said to her that she needed to act differently with her children if she wanted them to feel the love. And she said, my children know I love them because I cleaned for them and cooked for them. I said, but that wasn't their love language, all of them. So they didn't all feel loved, even though you were doing what you thought communicated love, which is where you get to them saying, Lord, Lord. And he said, but you're not communicating and doing with me the way I want because you're not doing what I wanted you to do. Now, you didn't know any better necessarily. And that's why that's all on the Father. The Father has to reveal. And if he hasn't chosen to, that's not their fault. Okay, so let's be clear with that. So I don't think for a second that anybody, Jewish, Christian, or otherwise, loves God or the Creator, even anybody in a pagan religion. I don't think they don't love whatever they think the Creator is, genuinely. He just says that for me to actually be in a relationship where we are in that love relationship, this is what I require. If you love me, you will do these things, okay? And so if you're reading the book, you should understand and say, okay, I love him, but I'm not guarding the commands. Well, that's a problem. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question. That's a good question. Okay, next. One more, Rob, and then we'll come back out here.
Okay. From Eva Yvonne, from John 14, verse 11. Rabbi, what is the best way to respond to a Christian friend who says, Jesus told me to, when they give gifts like books or something that are not in agreement with Torah?
Okay, what's the best way to respond when somebody gives you a gift that's not in line with Torah that they say, Jesus told them to give it to you? Well, first of all, I probably would agree that maybe that was the reason why they gave it to him, but that's not what Yeshua would have wanted to do, obviously, which is why we have this very different understanding of what Christianity would refer to Jesus and what we would refer to Yeshua, and that's why you listen to the teaching, beware false prophets, so you can understand where that all comes from. But if your friend is giving you something genuinely because they care about you, you can either politely say, thanks, but no thanks, all right? Hey, I appreciate that, but I really, that's not in line with where I am, and so I really don't, I mean, especially if it's clear that they know that they're trying to indoctrinate you in some way, get you to see things a certain way. You could certainly politely refuse that, okay? Just like you would politely refuse pork or shellfish that was put in front of you. Say, hey, listen, I appreciate that you made that effort to cook this for me and everything, but I can't eat that, okay? And so just be respectful, and you can decline respectfully. I don't think that's a problem. Okay, next. Okay, I'm sorry, I was gonna come out here. Connor.
If it's all right, I have a couple comments and then
Sure.
a question.
See that? The guy gets engaged and right away he wants to get up and make comments and stuff. No, wait a minute. I'm teasing you. Connor actually has made comments before, and he actually comes and asks questions privately in councils and stuff. So I'm just teasing him, but I just thought it was funny to say that. Anyway.
The first thing is, as we were reading through chapter 14, something that really jumped out to me was the word shall. It appears everywhere all throughout the chapter. And recently with my job, I've been going through a lot of code books and regulations, and like one of the first things that all these code books do is they tell you what shall means. And shall always means, the definition for shall is, shall denotes an action, process, or criteria that is not changeable under any circumstances. It never changes. It's always the exact same. You can't, it's always the same.
Awesome.
So I think when it says, when Yeshua says, if you love me, you shall guard my commands, that's not an option ever at all, period. And for everything he says with shall in the sentence, none of that's ever an option. So when he says, if anyone loves me, he shall guard my word. The Father shall love him, and we shall come to him and make our stay with him. These are statements that will happen if you follow these criteria.
Awesome.
And another thing was when it says, whatever you ask in my name, that I shall do, in order that the Father might be esteemed in the Son. And if you ask whatever in my name, I shall do it. You mentioned how that's not just like the magical name of Yeshua. You just say it and you get whatever you want. So my thought on it was maybe that means not just, whatever you say in my name, but when you are in my name, when you are under my authority and you ask for something, then I shall give it. And then kind of to back that thought up was in chapter 15, verse 7. It says, if you stay in me and my word stays in you, you shall ask whatever you wish and it shall be done for you.
Exactly.
And then it says, believe in me that I am in the Father and the Father in me. Otherwise, believe in me because of my works. And it mentions works a few times, and it says, if you love me, you shall guard my commands, and that sort of thing. So it makes me think of the John Mayer song, Love is a Verb. Love is an action-based thing. It's not just an emotion or just a feeling. You have to have the actions to back up when you say you love the Creator.
Amen. And by the way, thank you. Now I don't need to make a song reference because you did. All right. Michael.
I just wanted to say that this is, for me, kind of continuing off my praise and prayer, but relative to the teaching today, this has been a week of admonishments for me. Now you and Rabbi Tom have both told me that I'm not doing enough. Connor and Shamash Steve just told me I'm not doing enough. So I need to do more to be more vertically in line with Yeshua and with the Father. But one of the things that occurred to me while we were reading this today is that he was telling the disciples in a very long form that they were about to see some really scary stuff, and they might be scared off the path, and that they need to buckle down and keep shalom and keep emunah, because good things are coming.
Amen. Amen. Look, there's a sports phrase that I think has to do with when he was talking about not doing enough and having to do more. I think we need to understand the idea of like making sure that you leave it all out there on the field. In other words, did you do everything and just put it all out there? Or did you come back and still have more you could have done? I mean, can you with integrity say that I gave it all? Because that's something that I would ask children, more than giving foolishness of giving trophies to everybody. I think you learn a lot from losing. But what I want to be able to do is talk to the child and say, did you give it all? Did you leave anything on the field? Did you give it everything? Okay? As long as you gave it all, you should feel great about that effort, and then realize that all, based on your current skill sets and everything else, wasn't enough to win. But you could feel good that I gave it everything. And so then you learn to go do other things and have other distinctions and other insights that can help you get better. But the idea that you gave it all is really important. Okay, Janet?
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So the love, right? To me, this was the main thing that I got from it, like out of that love. Like, if you love me, you shall guard my commands. And I remember something that my mom used to say a lot when we were growing up. When we didn't want to do something, she would say this in Spanish, por el amor de Dios, which is for the love to God. Do this, just put yourself on the side and just do it. Go and ask for forgiveness, forgive me, or do whatever you're supposed to do. So for me, when I look at my life, my life started when he opened my eyes. Before that, there was no life. It was death. But 3 years ago, I was talking to my husband. It's been about 4 years or so, but 3 years since MTOI and being with you. And I'm thinking, I'm growing in that process. The Torah, like you always say, keeping Shabbat, kosher, all that comes. It's very natural right now thanks to him and to your teaching, comes very naturally in my life. But the things that don't come naturally, which is to be patient, to be loving, to be all that, that is, I think that maybe I should bring my mom's words to remind myself, for love that you have for him, just do it at that point. And that takes me to the Ruach, because you're talking a lot about the Ruach. My question was, what would be like the right connection, or I don't know, we cannot have a relationship because it's not a living, I mean, it's alive, but it's not a living, whatever, person. But what would be the right connection that we could access that, like he's supposed to, or it's supposed to remind us of what is already there, like his word. But is it okay then in that moment to just, whenever we're struggling or having a trial, just go and ask the Spirit or Yeshua instead to help us? Is that a good way to?
Okay, look, the Ruach does what it does, serves the purpose that it does, and all you need to do is try to communicate with the Father and the Son, and the Ruach is the means by which that'll take place. Just focus on the Father and the Son. The Ruach will be involved as the means of that interaction, okay? But you don't have to consciously, invoke or be aware of involving the Ruach, okay? Every time you try to talk to the Father, every time that you communicate, and look to your older brother in Yeshua, this is all happening through the Ruach, okay?
Thank you, Rabbi. That's great. And my question is about John 14:13. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I connected to Matthew 7:7. When it talks about, you should ask, and whenever you ask, you'll be given, knock, and the door will be open to you, and all that. Mm-hmm. Is that a good connection?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, good.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I just wanted to share, I don't know, a long time ago, I had a friend who was in a marriage, and she was very unhappy because her husband was adulterous. But then they reconciled. But in the process, she was having a lot of resentment towards him. And one of the things that she told me, and this is a Christian woman, of course, she didn't know Torah, but one of the things she said in her testimony, she said, every time I have to go and help him and serve him food, like she was a housewife, and I put whatever you put your apron on, I go and I see the Father in him, and that's the only way I can do this, because all my resentment and hurt and all that, I can't. But so a lot of times, I don't know if this is a good example, but would that be a good way to kind of, even though we're not looking at the person, but trying to see him in that person that we're having problems with? Would that be something that we could use?
I probably wouldn't approach it that way. I would approach it more that the person that we're struggling with is a work in progress, and that the areas we struggle in is because both you and the other person are lacking some of the Yeshua-like qualities in some areas, which is why we struggle. Because if you and I were in a relationship, if we were both Yeshua-like in a very full way, we would never have a problem. We have problems because one or both of us, probably both of us, have parts of us that are not Yeshua-like. And so it's not that you want to see the Father in them if they're really not acting in any way that you see the Father in them, okay? But you want to see that they are a work in progress, and if they're the way they are and the Father hasn't touched them yet, well, then you understand that you need to be talking to the Father about that, as opposed to the other way around. But just always seeing them as they are where they are because they are a product of everything that's happened in their life up to that point. And they're a product of the level of relationship they have vertically. Okay? All right.
I kind of had a question there in 15, John 15, he talks about how we didn't choose him, he chose us. And that kind of takes me back into 14 where he says that he won't leave us orphans. And part of that, I think, and maybe you can expound on this a little bit, is something you said in the Zoom last night about how when he pops our bubble and we start seeing things like this and we start getting the mechanics and things start opening up, and then it gets to a point where then we start looking back at ourselves to say, are we loving him and following his word? Is that what we're supposed to be trying to do, as in walking out this love with one another and him? Is really examining ourselves and seeing if we're lining up with the word and the helpers there to help us, convict us, guide us, and direct us in that?
Absolutely. And by the way, thank you for reminding. When I went to do that little whole and zooming out thing, I couldn't remember what I said last night, so you reminded me. Thank you. So what I said last night, okay, so I'll give you one of the insights you missed. Janet's like, yay. People who wanted, they'll say, well, I just want to go deeper. I want deeper, okay? Okay, so let me tell you how deeper looks, one metaphor for it, okay? Okay, so you have this little pinhole, and you're starting to see a little bit of the truth, and then it starts to open up and open up and open up, and then deeper is when it reverses, and you're now looking in instead of looking out, okay? Because first you're seeing the outside, and you're seeing things more clearly, and you can now see all that's out there without the filters, but then it flips when you're ready to go deeper, and now you're looking inside, okay? And so that's for all of you to think, yeah, but Rabbi, we liked it better when you just taught the mechanic stuff, and now you're doing all this personal development. Listen, I'm teaching everything personal development right out of Torah. You want it deeper, that's deeper. Deeper means working on you. It does not require anything deep to keep Saturday instead of Sunday and eat differently and keep different holy days. That doesn't require anything deep, okay? How you love him and how you love each other. Now we're talking some deep stuff, okay? And working on all those flaws and all those issues inside of our character and personalities and all those other things that create all these problems. So I like that metaphor, and I thank you for bringing it up, because as I was doing it, I'm thinking, wait, I did something like that last night. What did I do? And I couldn't remember what that was all about. See, sometimes it's good for me to record these things so I can remember because it was something I'd never done before, okay? But I think that's a really cool thing to think about, how it will now reverse and focus inside. Okay, live stream.
Okay, from Joseph Neal, when people say that we no longer need a teacher because we have the Holy Spirit, would you agree that Yeshua said this is to those who are fully trained and not just to everyone?
Okay, I would first say yes to that part, but also the everyone part still is that as you are connected in that vertical way with the Ruach, it is going to bring to remembrance his words, the way I've taught you his words, because when you hear the words out of my mouth and you recognize that they're his words, then he's going to bring those things to remembrance, okay? So I think it's something everybody gets, not just the 12. But the idea, again, is he never gave it to be that he would just send this Ruach and they would have no need of anything. They still had to get together. They still had James as the head of their group in Jerusalem. They still had to make decisions and choices and seek counsel. And these things had to be done through the vertical structure. And then Paul endorses that, obviously, in Ephesians 4. So, with the fivefold ministry. So it's always been that structure. And then actually he sends them all out in Matthew 28, says, go and make disciples. Now, of course, he's only sending out the ones who were trained to go and do this. But he didn't say, go and just have them believe in me so the Ruach will teach them everything. Okay? And all these people out there that claim to be or are actually filled with Ruach still have lots of questions. They all still have questions because it's not designed to work that way. And I don't remember what I said because it's a long time ago, but if you go and listen to Learn and Teach the Torah, the whole teaching is an argument and case for why we need teachers, okay? All right, that's the whole point of that teaching. And so you may want to go back. I may need to redo that one because it's very old, but, relative to, our perspective on time, but it's probably a good 8-10 years old. So it's a pretty old teaching. But anyway, just look at the full picture as you zoom out, and the full picture is clearly he's going to still work through a structure. Clearly he's setting up teachers out there and training and raising up teachers. You see Paul doing this and also raising up teachers. And that's the structure. And all have the Ruach, and the Ruach is helping you. Okay? But the Ruach is when some of you say to me, Rabbi, I have you in my head all day. Well, that's not me. It's the words of him, his words that I said that are still in there that the Ruach keeps bringing out to your head. All right? It's not everything I say that pops in your head. It's the stuff that he said through me that comes into your head. And that he keeps pushing in there in the situational need for some of the things that I've taught you, that he's given me to teach you, as you need it in a situation, that will come to your head. That's the Ruach doing that, all right? That's the Ruach doing it. And so let's not lose that perspective. Okay, Rob, one more?
From MTOI Philippines, Just Sing says, Rabbi, how do we answer properly when a Christian says that we all worship the same God, even they just have the different titles or names?
Okay. First of all, you don't have to answer anybody anything. And if you're talking to someone who has a different belief system than you do, like the Christians do, or the Jews, or any other religion out there, they're not necessarily going to be able to receive what you say anyway. Okay? So just try to avoid conflict. If possible, be at peace with all men. And just be okay that you guys don't see it the same. But, you can't really answer those questions in a way that is going to satisfy the other person. Oh, but if we're all worshiping the same God, blah, 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 blah. Well, the question is, does the same God we all worship desire to be worshiped a certain way? Okay? And if he does, has he communicated that to us? And so I already said that I know that they all love. Most of these religions are not like worshiping stone anymore. They're worshiping what they believe, like we do, is the creator being. Okay, but they don't understand him the way we do. We understand him differently. And their emotion about that is similar. Okay, they have love and fear and respect and awe and reverence and all that kind of stuff. But it's a matter of understanding what his expectations are relationally with us. We understand that differently. Okay? Okay, Heather?
You already answered kind of one of the questions about the Ruach that I had, as far as I was going to ask, is that still small voice that you hear? And it's confirmation, right? So, for example, if I'm listening to a teaching, like prior to coming here, it's like, okay, can I be submitted to this leadership? And I would listen to a teaching, and he would bring the word to remembrance, scripture, and I'd go and go, oh yeah, that fits. Confirmation. Would that be appropriate?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then I was just thinking about when it says, he who possesses my commands and guards them, it's he who loves me. And I was just thinking that might be related. Oop, I'm bad at that. And you shall lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your being, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and shall be as frontlets between your eyes. I would think that would be an example of that possessing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, when you look at the Ve'ahavta, it absolutely lays out that same idea, right? It says first he wants you to love him with everything. And then he says, and this is going to be something that is in your thoughts. It's always in front of your eyes. It's in all your actions, in your hands. It's in your walk everywhere you go. It's every moment that whether you're going to sleep or whether you're waking up, whether you're in your house or outside or wherever you're, it's all encompassing. Okay, so the Ve'ahavta from Deuteronomy does have that, Deuteronomy 6, 5 through 9. Okay, so it's absolutely there. Okay, Shannon?
This is kind of it's a comment / question. I just want to be sure that I'm seeing it correctly. When you were talking about the Ruach, the Ruach, which is the essence of Yeshua, his way of communicating to us, and I remembered Isaiah 11:2. The Spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge, the fear of Yahweh. Is that how we can also see the Ruach, or is that something different?
No, again, remember, the Ruach is it doesn't give you any of those things. What it does is, as you're learning them, it helps to remind you, it helps to give you the confirmation that what you're learning is correct. And so, in itself, it doesn't just give you all of a sudden wisdom and knowledge and understanding and all these other things. However, as you're gaining those things, the Ruach is there to help you to see those things correctly.
And to eventually, have it become who we are?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
All right? Okay, again, we have to be careful we don't end up in that place where we think the Ruach all of a sudden will give us, like by fiat, wisdom or knowledge or understanding or some other thing. You still have to be pursuing those things. The Ruach is going to help you to incorporate and recognize as you get pieces of wisdom and knowledge and understanding and those things, etc. All right, Cole?
John 14:6, it says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I was just looking through the whole entire thing. It was providing examples for each one of those. And I wrote some notes down. I wrote down, Yeshua showed the way, truth, and life. In 13, it says, whatever you ask in my name, that I shall do, in order that the Father might be esteemed in the Son. Normally when we ask for something, it's because we're in distress, right? Or we need or we want something. Mm-hmm. And then it says, as long as, in 14, if as long as it does not interfere with Torah or Shabbat, he'll allow it to, we'll actually get an answer that we want or help us in a way. And and then if the problem is on a Shabbat, he can test us to see if we will guard the commands, for example. Mm-hmm. And then from there, it will test us to animate us to do what is right, which is the spirit of the truth. And then I made another connection to that, which is the helper. And I went down to 26, but the helper, the set-apart spirit, whom the Father shall send in my name, he shall teach you all and remind you of all that I said to you. But I was just looking at it from a different perspective. He says he shall teach you all, which he teaches us by providing us, lessons to be learned, or like everybody was trying to figure out what the Ruach was, which is the spirit through conflicts that we have. And as long as we do what is right, he will give us like an appropriate answer to give us peace. Is that correct?
Sure. I think that, I'm just trying to think of all the ways you said it. I think you did a really good job there piecing that together. It's a good job. All right. Now, in case anybody listening was a little confused, now, none of the verses we read mentioned Shabbat, but he was using Shabbat as an example, as part of that. So, I mean, just it wasn't that it was limited there, but he was kind of just using that as sort of the launching point to go through that. It was very good. All right, Michael.
Sorry, Rabbi, I meant to get to this one earlier, but you said something last night on the Zone 3 meeting that I'd like the ability to quote it again, but without it being memorialized, I don't want to say it. So it was about the four things that you intend for each teaching is for us to understand it,
right,
do it, defend it, right, and teach it. So I just...
No, okay, so last time we were talking about, going deeper, and I was also saying I don't understand, when people ask about just all kinds of peripheral things to study, because they want to study. I think it's more of the dopamine addiction we have, which we want new and different all the time, That's why we get on our phones and we're just nonstop scrolling through everything, because our attention is only going to get a quick dopamine hit, and we got to go to the next one and the next one and the next one. And I think that the point I was making was, though, that the teachings, you need to listen to them over and over again. Why? Because they're designed or intended to accomplish four things, and you can't do that with one listen. I mean, I intend with the teaching that you would understand the material so that you can do whatever it is that needs to be done, so that you can then defend what you're doing, and then eventually teach it to somebody else if it came up in an opportunity where you would be able to share what it is that you do and why you do it, right? And you can't get that out of 1, 2, even 3 listenings. I mean, you have to really study the teaching. The teaching itself is a study of a section of Scripture, and then you need to study the teaching as part of that. And so I haven't mentioned that in a while, and I mentioned it last night, so Michael brought it up. But the teachings have always been designed to accomplish those four things. And I've also said often, you may not get it until you listen to it more than once, but I put more than an hour's worth of stuff into the hour, because I didn't do it. He can you've got 66 books that feel like it's got 366 books worth of material in here. Okay, and he repeats himself a ton, and still there's an unbelievable amount of material in here. And you know I've read you John 14 many times, and 1 John many times, and yet somehow we always get something more out of it. Okay, so since it's his word, what I give you for 70 minutes, go back and you'll get 370 minutes worth of stuff out of there at least. Because it's all in there so much, and but you'll miss some of it each time until you keep listening and listening. Because the ruach in your mind and all of the combination will focus on that one little piece that you needed that moment. The next time you'll go and listen to it, you'll already know that piece, and then you'll hear another piece that you need to focus on. All right, Christine?
I wanted to share something that the Father taught me a long time ago, because I thought the chapter fit well with what you've been saying. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 2.
Okay.
The main verse is verse 11, but the whole chapter works together for everything that you've been saying today. It says, "For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of the man that is in him? So also the thoughts of Elohim no one has known except the spirit of Elohim." And
very good connection.
And the Father has taught me about the Ruach from when I was 16, and I had no slate to clear at all. I wasn't raised anything, and
No, it's a very good. No, and that's where Paul's really trying to help understand, as he then explains. He says that we've received not the spirit of the world, but the spirit that is of Elohim, in order that we can know what Elohim has favorably given us. And so that is Paul trying to explain what I've been explaining from John 14. So good connection there. Okay, excellent connection. Okay, Grayson?
So throughout the whole teaching, the image that I had in my head was the one that you teach about on the path with the blood covering over the top of it. And like today I was thinking about it in like a slightly different way, and I wanted to check with you to see if that was appropriate. So the way that I was visioning it was that you have like the maze, that's life, and at one end you have the moment you have your bubble popped, and then the other end you have the kingdom, and that above the maze you have the blood canopy that's going across of it. And then so when you're walking through the maze, that you're going to have times where you're going to have to choose left or right, and if you're trying to rely only on yourself, that you're not going to be able to consistently make the right choice to end up where you want to end up, and that the only way to get there would be to have your attention looking up to the blood canopy, which would be Yeshua.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. I mean, I've taught it in the story as a very straight path, but I like your way of, reworking it, to make the point. Remember, these metaphors are all to make points, right? And I think I like the way he made that point as well. So very good. All right? I wonder if he's thinking about the maze because he just saw Shang-Chi or something like that. But anyway, got to get a movie reference in there as well, right? Okay. Rob, anything pressing? Because we're already at 5:30.
No, not really. No, you're good.
Okay, good. The children are coming in. All right, excellent job, everybody.